Oui, je vais vous faire une petite présentation qui, à mon avis, va vous...
I'm going to make some presentations which will disappoint you, unfortunately, because there's not much to tell, and there are probably people in the audience who will have much more than I will, much more to say, and more specifically Mrs. Damian, who will speak at the round table, dealing with the whole file on the World Heritage, UNESCO Heritage, regarding the Great War landscape and sites. But still, it's quite interesting to see, what a person like me can find or not on a specific topic when you try to organize a symposium. I've just mentioned a few people. Stuart Reid was thanking, and I experienced this tree avenues, thanks to the tree people in charge of TreeNet, Joanne Morgan, who made a presentation of her thesis that she supported. Thanks also to Gordon Fulton, but also thanks to the fact that it is rather easy to identify in English things like tree avenues, or in German, of course, Allées, and in various languages. There's always this problem in France not to use the word allées enough. So we really have to define the things we are talking about, also define the context we are evolving, and a term also which allow us to identify things. So when I started getting interested in this question, which I found really interesting, and I didn't find much, or I found little on France, Belgium, and Germany. And when I asked the people and my partners and various my co-workers on these tree avenues in those countries, there were little data available, and sometimes none. So this question was this question dealing with the Commonwealth, more specifically due to the fact we had not repatriated the bodies because of costs, or maybe for to be fair, not to separate brothers of arms, for example. And in France, the need was different. Maybe we didn't need to have some memory areas, or souvenirs, or mourning areas, or personal areas, because the cemeteries or the necropoles were maybe more accessible. And also, because, thanks to the law of 1920, we managed then to repatriate some bodies. The support by the French government has leads to the fact that the communities themselves were taken away from action, because things were taken in charge by other bodies, and also the fact that it didn't have any debate on what could be the kind of monument which would be best suited. And also some debates we had on the useful monument, or a beautiful monument, or stone monument within the city, or tree avenues, for example. And then, at home here in France, we decided to choose the stone monument within the city. So, even if sometimes in France there are universities and businesses also who took part to the financing of some monuments, though there were some subscriptions added to public funds, then we didn't look for the most profitable solutions, which will lead to planting tree avenues. Another element, maybe, which would make a difference is the notion of cult name, which is a way of making the absent present by naming them. So we saw all these plaques and all these list of names, which played a very important role in these memorial avenues from the Commonwealth. For each soldier, for example, there is a plate which commemorates the name of the soldiers and tells about his biography, the biography of these soldiers. And this is a characteristic of the Anglo-Saxon approach. And this also remained rather disregarded by France until recently. In 2014, there was the ring of memory at Notre-Dame de Lorette, because at the Douaumont-Ossuarie, contains no names of the French soldiers. And after the war, France asked the Imperial War Graves Commission to reduce to 4 instead of 12 the monuments bearing a list of names to be placed on the French territory. Something else maybe which makes the difference also is the weight of the tree and the importance of the tree in the landscape and the metropole, which traditionally speaking, yes, I skipped the slide very quickly, but we can see that we're dealing with cemeteries, civil cemeteries, and so in France, in Trampeau, and in Germany, in my family also, we can see the greenery, which is rather important. So compared, as opposed to the French, for example, regarding the landscape issue and the importance of the tree and the importance of cemeteries, British people actually use an iconic person, Jagil, and we didn't have this kind of choice in France. So we didn't ask important people like Gertrude Jekyll in France. We do not have the same symbolic in France either. Compared with Germany, and the French landscape is probably a landscape as we saw it in what the soldiers were saying, discovering France. They said they had a landscape with a lot of trees, and sometimes when we see so many of those trees, we look at them, but then we do not look at trees the same way we would look at trees when some places do not have that much trees, so many trees. Sorry. But anyway, I'm getting lost in my paper, but still, that was just to mention this omnipresence, and we talked about in France during the First World War, and so we can see that the tree, though we have little and few elements telling that they played a very important role in the memorial aspect in France, Belgium, and Germany, we can see that it is still there in commemoration. In Germany, for example, in the German cemetery on the French territory, we are in the Meuse department, and we can see the presence of the tree, which is very important and stands in the form as a grove, because the Heldenhainer, the hero awards from the Willy architects, the idea was to have one oak per soldier, and then when Tischler, the architect, was in charge of defining the laying out of the military cemeteries from Germany, then he also devoted a lot of space to trees. Now, in the form of avenues, we realize that the trees are also present in cemeteries. We find them in Tübingen, military square leading to the war memorial, and also with the ifs also, and this is a picture from Germany. The cemetery was designed in 1920 with plain trees and lime trees also being organized in the shape of a star. I also identified some other avenues, memorial avenues in Germany, Oriental Frise, and some examples of short avenues leading to war memorials or to the cemetery where the soldiers are being buried. France and Belgium also has some tree avenues which are planted, connected with the First World War. And here is an example in Orange, and there are some examples of avenues leading to war memorials. In Belgium, the Helden Line was the hero alley in Zottingen with the 26 plane trees and also the Tree of Liberty and Orange also we can see in France and Vevey in the Cher area, where in a newspaper of 1931 it was published that as a planting with 2 rows of a chestnut and produced by Verdun. So again, like Great Britain, same story, the idea of bringing acorns, actually bringing back acorns and for chestnuts or to show the presence. And so Guadelville, also it was also very important because 6 acorns were brought in 1688 by the Huguenot Jean Ardiol, and they were planted in Cape Colony in what we call le coin des Français, the French corners, a Franschhoek, that is in South Africa, and they were planted to grow as a young trees and young oak for the Memorial Avenue. In Belgium, Canada Land, Allées, Canadian Avenue, with maple trees being planted in 1916, presenting with the specificity that it follows the frontline track. So we do not have any elements in these avenues which allow us to associate each tree to a specific soldier. Now Germany seems to have such avenues with 42 lime trees in Karlberg, Lower Saxe, and also lime trees near Munich. So I didn't really get into details, but as I said, I'm not a specialist, but still, this allows us to highlight some starting points, and I like that when we start looking at something, then we start getting into details, getting more and more details. Also with Australia, for example, we start with an inventory and then we see more and more coming up. Now, if tree and avenues didn't play a specific role in the memorial practices just after the war, then it's rather interesting to see that for the centenary, it was completely reinvested and we planted trees. For example, ginkgo, which was offered by the German city, twinning city in N. It was planted on the 8th of November, last November, and the tree of brotherhood also in Montville, in Seine-Maritime, and also the tree of peace for United Europe and for the for a peaceful world, planted in some colleges and some schools. In the Pas-de-Calais, we planted some trees as well, and groves in forests in Carvin, and that was a project called 100 years, 100 children, 100 trees, and we planted also trees, tree avenues, and the association planted cormiers, and also avenues were planted, and this time with the identification of one soldier allocated to one tree. The same model as what we saw in Australia or elsewhere. In some municipalities in the Jura, Brévent-Champagny, that was planted in 2014. And these people actually didn't know anything about the history and the historical background we're talking today. But the Department Council in the Jura area now had some trees planted in the Choux forest, considering that all in all, I mean, these trees in this forest were far from their villages, and so the people from the villages wouldn't see them. And so planting a tree in a forest to identify and have a look at it, I mean, and go and visit it was not very easy. And so the best way of creating and connecting with the population was finally, I mean, create these new avenues. So with a gap of 100 years and kilometers away, it's kind of stories working as a loop. So it's not a story of memorial avenues and war story. It's really a story of links and human beings. So thanks to the avenues and trees. Thank you.